Hey everybody, so welcome back. Hope everyone had a good holiday, those that do that thing. And so we're going to continue on with our malware course. Here in part 2, we're going to be talking about purpose-driven malware and behavioral content. So in lesson 1, we kind of learned how malware acts, and in lesson 2, we're going to evolve it to kind of adapt and how defenders use that adaptation as intelligence. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to cover how real malware searches with intent instead of blind enumeration. Right, so instead of just going in and just scanning entire directories, we're actually going to be like, okay, I want you to go look for this, and if you find it, let me know. Okay, permission models and how that shape attackers' behavior. How partial failure is more informative than total failure, how defenders use containment, not deletion. We're going to be talking about AppArmor a good bit, and reason about how the code structure enables adaptation without complexity. I will be referring to the new code throughout, but I will, just like the first lesson, I will be creating a separate lesson where we actually, coming this week, where we will actually go through that code in detail. Okay, so if you remember what we've built, right? So the current malware enumerates, reports, and it also avoids signature detection, right? So it basically walks the directories, and it reports on what it walked, if it was able to get in there, and then we ran clam AV against it to show that there was no it was not matched by it wouldn't be detected by antivirus, right? Because that's kind of the whole point of developing this brand new application. It's so that we're not dealing with knowns, right? We don't have those hashes. We don't have it's not a part of a malware family. We're having to approach this from the ground up, which is the whole point. Right, and so kind of a core takeaway from lesson 1 was that behavior matters more than binaries, right? Seeing what this thing does, trying to understand it, right? That's the important part. And so, right now our malware honestly looks a lot more realistic than a lot of malware demos you'll find online, but it is limited, right? Because once again, we are evolving, right? We are taking this malware, we're evolving it, and then adding new features and new capabilities, and at the same time we're evolving defense, right? Like, okay, got it, defenders got this thing handled the first time, but now with these new features and everything and less evidence possibly, what do we do? How do we evolve ourselves? Okay, so the one limitation the malware had is that it didn't care about anything, right? Like I said, it just kind of enumerates everything, generates an in-memory report, and sends it to a C2 server. Okay, it's like that's a lot to dig through. Like if you're actually looking for something, that's too much to dig through, right? That whole idea, this, really think of lesson 1 and 2, this is kind of recon and testing, right? Where, because like I said in the first video, when I was misbehaving, I would get into a system very low risk that I kind of knew that I had been in before, and just test things like in an environment that I can have access to, but I necessarily don't control, right? And just see if this works. And so, that's kind of where we're at right now. But moving on, we want to get particular things, right? We're not concerned about, we're not concerned about some random employee's notepads, right? Like, who cares? Unless it has passwords in it. And we'll talk about scanning these files, that'll be an evolution, right? But right now, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at naming patterns, and we're going to be looking at file extensions. And there's going to be a pattern to that the malware now follows, okay? Now, so the attacker mindset here, okay? So like I said, it walked, it listed, and it collected. That's what it's doing now. And so, like I said, you don't enumerate everything because it's noisy. Okay, you're going to get popped, right? The whole idea here, and in the next lesson, we're going to be introducing that, right? We're going to be introducing persistence and laying dormant until something interesting happens on the server, and then going and grabbing that. Okay, and then that's going to be another level, not only for the malware, but also another level for the defenders to have to step up, right? Now when it comes to analysis, blind enumeration is kind of a red flag for defenders. So malware that touches everything, it usually doesn't know what it's doing yet. Okay, so like I said, like when I was doing my thing, this is early stage tooling, right? I would get into a system, try things out, see what would break, and then make it better. Or often with commodity malware, it's very noisy, right? Because it's meant for kind of mass distribution, and it's designed to run on a lot of systems, and it's really built for breadth and not depth, right? It just they tend to access a lot of files. There's lots of failed attempts, and that doesn't really look like it has a preference. Now, this is much different than intentional noise, right? So one of the things that we will cover in later lessons is using intentional noise as misdirection. That is not this, right? This is just the malware being noisy. And then, of course, spray and pray attacks. This is just going in, scanning everything, and seeing what hits. It's like sending a spam. It's like sending out spam, right? You send 20 million spam messages, but you're only expecting 1 or 2% to actually click on the thing. But yeah, so more mature malware intrusions, they look very different. There's fewer files touched. There's specificity involved, and they fail in interesting places. So let's look at. Let's go into the Malware 1.0 demo and refresh ourselves on what exactly it's doing. All right, so here we are back in our V1 code. I'm going to start up the server. Got that going. All right, now let's run this thing. All right, so we'll come over here. We'll see that the first beacon, so you'll see here, so I deleted those junk directories, that's why they're not here, but that's kind of not the point, right? The point here is that, we're kind of looking for something, sudoers, oh, we got a beacon, sudoers, Etsy shadow, password, SSH, high value, right? So it's like, okay, looking for credentials, it looks like, but bro, you're just looping. It's just going after the same files, which is ridiculous, right? I mean, what do you think? Like all of a sudden they're going to drop permissions or like not protect these files anymore? Like, I guess it could kind of give you some targets for escalation, but there's really not a lot of information here for you, So this is the output of 1, and you'll see that when we show the output of 2, the new version, it's going to look very different. Okay, so what does intent mean in practice? All right, so we're not talking about exploits, pre-escalation, data theft, or stealth, or anything right here, right? I always think of intent as more of a recon activity, and because you're going in there and seeing if this system has something that you are interested in, right? So, when malware encounters something that matches particular patterns, it needs to mark that discovery as significant, record that the target was interesting, and ensure that information is included in the report, right? So over here in our version 2, right, you're going to see that I have defined these, right? So we're not doing hard-coded, we're no longer doing hard-coded paths here, right? We are scanning the one root directory, right? We're going to expand that out, but right now we have a singular root directory that this thing is going to crawl. It is going to see if anything with these patterns exist, and it's going to let us know. This is going to give us immediate feedback on if something that we are interested in is actually there, okay? So that's what we're doing here. All the hard-coded paths, the only thing we see here is we're still, we have a base path that's hard-coded. This is basically where the malware would land, because it does need to land somewhere, okay? And then right now we have a singular base path, but what you do is you typically define a hard-coded base path like this, but then the malware will sprawl, right? And you see here, we're still giving the defenders a little bit of stuff with our reports, right? And we'll get into that. And another thing that we're doing, which we'll talk about here shortly, is here, right? So we're no longer unwrapping everything, right? We're not just crashing. We're not just failing loudly. Okay, this actually makes the malware a lot more resilient, because when it runs into an error, we handle those, and that's something that we'll talk about. We'll talk about the value of that. Okay, so from a defender's perspective, this evolution is critical, because instead of seeing just that list of access files, you start to see a pattern, right? And you start to see repeated focus. And so this is when these defenders, they stop asking about they stop asking about what a process touched and why it touched it, right? So as you can see, this kind of benefits both sides, right? It's a great recon activity for attackers, but and it's very clear and gives us lets us know what's on the system and things of interest, but it also helps the defenders know a little bit what's going on. And of course, there's things that we will do to obscure that in future evolution. But that's where we're at right now. Okay, now let's talk about those errors. Okay, so let's talk about what the malware does when it doesn't get what it wants. Okay, so in most programming courses, the errors are treated as something to avoid. And in a lot of beginner malware demos, they're just ignored and just allowed to crash the program or something, right? This is not realistic at all. Okay, so in real intrusions and in analysis, they are signals. That's what these are. So you need to get out of this old mindset of errors has bugs and accept that errors are boundaries, right? So in a lot of early stage code, you're going to see, failure leads to crash, right? If this error is, ignore it. If it panics, restart, right? And so this makes sense if you're trying to learn syntax and you're getting going, but when you're actually trying to do from an attacker or defender side, right? It doesn't tell you anything. It's just there's a lot of valuable information there in those errors that you are losing from both sides, right? So what do we mean by errors as boundaries? Well, so instead of treating these things as something that goes wrong, we're going to be interpreting them as hitting boundaries. So these boundaries are file permissions, directory permissions, policy enforcement, access controls, and environment constraints, right? What happens when the malware hits a wall? It shouldn't crash, it shouldn't stop, it should say, okay, I can't go that way anymore, let me turn around and see if there's anything else I can do, okay? Now, we get into some exactly why errors matter for attackers, right? It's going to tell us which directories are protected, which ones we have access to, which ones are hardened, and which controls are in place. So this is going to help us as attackers figure out what the next step is. And it's also going to help us figure out, okay, so here's a hardened thing that I want to get into that looks interesting. What do I need to get into that? Okay, this directory that is protected, I want to get into there because that looks interesting. Okay, well that tells me then I need to come up with some kind of way to escalate privileges. Which controls are in place. This can let us know what kind of defense, this can let us glean information about the actual defenses of the system. Right now, like I said, this also greatly benefits defenders, because from the defender side, those structured failures are gold. Because, okay, a process failed to open a file, and then it just kind of blew up, okay? However, versus a process repeatedly attempting to access files matching a sensitive pattern and was denied. That tells the person something completely different, right? The first thing is noise, the second is intent, right? And so, this gives defenders the opportunity to ask, okay, what was being attempted? Where did it fail? Did it keep going? Did it change behavior, etc.? Right? So, evolution, kind of in a nutshell. The malware is no longer going to crash on errors. It's going to categorize failures. It's going to record what it tried to access, whether it succeeded or failed, when the failure occurred, and it's going to use that information to decide what to do next. Right? And so what we're going to do now in this demo is we're going to look at malware, the malware, I'm calling it 0.2. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the output, uncontained, And then what I'm going to do is go in there and show the difference when I go in and change the permissions on that directory. Okay, so here we are in 0.2. Okay, I'm going to run. Okay, and then we're going to look and see what we got. All right, so here we are. Now we'll see. So I've set up, I actually wrote some scripts to do this. If you guys want to mirror this lab, I'm actually going to upload some scripts that will set these directories up for you, and then it will also be a script there to tear them down for you. Okay, so if you want to mirror this lab, you'll be able to use those scripts to do that. But anyway, you'll see here that we landed in the opt high value lab directory. Okay, and we see here that we're looking, and you see here we're recording the kind, which is a directory, the outcome, we read it okay, and if it was a target hit. Now this is the important one, the target hit. And you'll see here, we got directories. Okay, here's a file. Remember how we, in the code, we defined these, right? So these are our targets, right? These are the files, the patterns or file extensions that we are looking for, right? And so that is why we got a target hit true, right? And here, like a financial report, customer data, right? And so what this does is this very clearly allows us as attackers to go look at this log and very easily skim it to see, okay, there's some things here that could be of interest to me. And it also tells you what the outcome was. It's like, okay, I actually got here and I read it okay. And it's like, so maybe I can just exfiltrate that. Right, and so that's the point, right? You want to give yourself this information to kind of figure out what your next plan is. Now, so let's go in there, all right, and we'll see in here we got that high value lab directory. So if I come in here and let's change the permissions to 700. I got ahead of myself. Yeah. Okay. There. All right. So now. So we're going to go back. So another thing that we're doing here. This is only running once. We are going to set up persistence in the next lesson. Right. So just to let you know that. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to run this again. And now, when we come over, right, we got locked, right? False, denied, right? So it locked us down. And so, yeah, just kind of wanted to show you how this responds to just getting locked out. Now, the thing is when we, but you see, but as we continue to evolve this thing out, we're going to add that persistence, and we're going to be like, okay, if I can't get into, even if the base directory is locked down where we want to go, we will have other places to pivot to. Okay, so let's quickly talk about failure classes, because not all failures are equal. Right, you've got file doesn't exist, you got permission issues, policy blocked, and IO errors, and other things. So in later sections, we'll see how defenders use those to infer like user level privileges, presence of MAC frameworks, harden areas of the system, and likely attacker goals. The key takeaway here is that the malware, it doesn't just log successes, right? Like you saw, it logs why something failed. It's important to remember in security work, failure is rarely the end of the story, right? It's usually the beginning of the analysis. So far, the malware has learned to want specific things, and it's learned how to respond when it's denied. Now we're ready to see what happens when the system intentionally kind of starts saying no, right? So, we've seen that our malware now looks for something, and we've talked about how attackers think in terms of credentials, secrets, and valuable data. But for any of that to matter, it needs a world that actually contains the things worth finding. Okay, and so that's what we're going to do now. So like I said, I provided 2 scripts in the lessons GitHub repo: set up high value and tear down high value. So these will allow you to build a controlled environment that mimics reality close enough to kind of learn from. All right, so this gives us predictable behavior, repeatable labs, clean teardown, and clear expectations, right, for both offense and defense. Now, obviously, in real intrusions, attackers tend to cluster around a few categories of interest, and ours mirrors this. Here, kind of high value means that files that look like they could unlock something else, right? Like I keep saying, something that, you know, gives us an idea of what we're going to do next, right? Credential looking files, configuration files, data files that resemble business or personal information. That stuff can be used for like extortion. And then shared resources that might be accessible across users, which you can use for lateral movement. All right, so the exact content doesn't really matter that much. It's the shape of the content that we're concerned with. Now, so the lab structure. So instead of hiding everything in one spot, we spread these fake high-value artifacts across realistic directory locations. Okay, so this matters because real systems don't keep all their secrets in one folder. So after running the setup script, you'll see representative artifacts placed in. So there's a custom op directory to simulate application data. There's a user local directory to represent installed services, and shared paths that resemble documentation or data storage, and temporary or writable areas that attackers often probe first. So this forces the malware to traverse realistically, make decisions about where to go, and causes it to encounter both successes and failures organically. Now, like I said, right now we are dealing with one base directory that it is trying to get through. Right? It's trying to get through this one base directory, mainly so that you guys can grasp the concepts and we get a very clean readout. But in the next lesson, we're going to drop that and it is going to expand to other directories. So you'll see, if we go in here and we look at the logs at the very bottom, right, we'll see that it pretty much stopped, you know, in Beacon, right? It pretty much stopped in opt, right? It never went to user local of var10. You know, which we created with our setup script. It's not because it can't, like I said, it's because it has not been instructed to, right? It's the current behavior model is like a scoped recon phase. It explores where it landed before deciding whether or not to expand. But in this case, it just scans that entire directory. You know, if it runs into a directory it can't get to or it cannot read, it doesn't go in there and looks for the next one. But it's stuck to one directory for now. And like as I said, as we progress, we'll set the malware from multiple crawl routes, privilege-based expansion, and event-driven expansion. Right now it just adapts to where it lands. Okay. And in the real world, the big directories are opt, serve, var www, and home user. You know, and so yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's go on down here to the malware with no containment. Okay. So let's talk about that. So no containment here means default Linux permissions, no Mac framework shaping the behavior, and no AppArmor profile applied to the malware. The malware is running in like a normal permissive environment. Okay, so now for this next demo, what we're going to do is we're going to stand up the lab environment. We're going to run once again with no AppArmor, and then we're going to observe for once more what this looks like without any kind of containment, and then we're going to go through and look at it with containment. Okay, so let's get the lab environment set up, right? So all you need to do is run is set up high value. Right, and then you'll see that these directories are created for us. And when you want to get rid of these, you can just run this script, and it will get rid of those files for you. This will be in the GitHub. Okay, so we're going to mainly talk about containment here, but I want to go ahead and run this. Okay, so, and just to make sure that the environment worked as well. And yeah, we're good. Oop. There. All right, so we're good. Okay, now, so containment. Okay, so the idea here is containment versus eradication, right? So right now we've seen the malware operate with intent. It's found what it's looking for. It's moving freely throughout the system, and it reports its successes. So, a reasonable first instinct here, I guess, would be to kill it. Kill the process, delete the binary, and then just re-image the system. Okay? But in real incident response, that's not the way that it goes, right? The moment you eradicate the thing, the behavior stops, the intelligence stream ends, you lose insight into the intent, you lose insight into scope, you lose the chance to learn, really. And honestly, you don't even really know what you killed, And so as a defender, you really shouldn't be thinking, oh, can I stop this thing? It really needs to be, what is this thing trying to do, okay? And so containment starts from the assumption that you're already compromised, right? And so this assumption allows defenders to reduce risk, preserve evidence, shape behavior, and buy them time, to be honest. This is important since time is very critical in incident response. So we're going to watch the thing move and then let it act, but only in the way that we choose it to. We can have containment, kind of limit what the malware can do and make sure that it doesn't go anywhere that we don't want it to. But it will allow us to reveal what the malware values and expose kind of what it's missing. Okay, so the goal here isn't to make things disappear. It's kind of to reveal. It's kind of to make the malware kind of reveal itself. Okay, now so let's talk about AppArmor. Okay, so now we're going to look at AppArmor. Basically, kind of think of it as like a behavioral cage. The malware will run. It'll think and try, but the system will now decide where the malware is able to go. So AppArmor is it's a mandatory access control system. It's policy based. It's applied to processes, not users, and it's designed to constrain behavior, even after compromise. It's not antivirus. It's not a detection tool. It's not a replacement for proper permissions. It just assumes that the process may be malicious. Okay, so traditional Linux permissions answer questions like, is the user allowed to read this file? Is the group allowed to access this binary, etc., right? But Mac is like, I don't care who you are, I'm always going to ask if you're allowed to do this, okay? So even if the malware is running as a legit user, AppArmor isn't gonna let it do just what it wants to do, right? So now you've probably heard, if you've heard of this stuff, you've probably heard of AppArmor and SE Linux. Okay, now honestly, guys, in a real environment, you're probably going to go SE Linux, and I'm going to have a video series on SE Linux at some point. But yeah, I mean, there's multiple Mac systems on Linux, but the two most common are AppArmor and SE Linux. And so we're using it here for three primary reasons. One, it's already installed on Ubuntu, right? That means we don't have to do any extra setup. The profiles are very readable. You can kind of look at an AppArmor rule and understand it without learning a brand new language, and it fails loudly, right? Denials are logged in a way that's really perfect for teaching this stuff and for analysis. SE Linux is used in RHEL or Fedora, and it gives you very granular control. But dude, like I said, it's a course unto itself. And so, like I said, in the future, I have plans to cover it. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at AppArmor. Where did my terminal go? There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at AppArmor. All right, so the way to check if AppArmor is up and running is to do sudo AA status, right? And it is, and we see here that it already has some modules loaded, okay, or profiles. Sorry. And so AppArmor profiles, they operate in two major modes: complain mode, which is no blocking, and it attempts to log what would have been denied. That's the thing, guys. Just like with anything else, and like I said in the OPSEC lesson series, these things stack. Like, you are not guaranteed to these Mac systems. You are not guaranteed to get what you're after. A lot of times, you will use these Mac systems, and you'll get containment, but it may not write logs for the thing, right? And so then what do you do from there? And that's the scenario that we're going to walk through today is, okay, if we get containment but we don't get any logs, what do we do, right? And then there's also enforce mode, right? And so this is where it actively blocks disallowed actions, and the denial will affect the program behavior, especially when you have malware like ours that tries to pivot, right? And so we're going to be switching a little bit between, you're going to end up kind of switching between complain mode and to observe, and then you're going to be using enforce mode to kind of shape the malware's behavior. And obviously in a real situation you would have this probably installed on a VM somewhere. You'd get the malware on that machine, and then you would be doing all this containment from there. Because in later lessons you'll see, as we make this thing sprawl out, it's going to it's going to be a lot harder to understand exactly what it's doing from a defender's perspective. Right now we're kind of in one directory. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these AppArmor directories. Okay, and you'll see here. All right, move this up. All right, you'll see here that we've got a few here, right? And you'll see that these paths, right? So each file in this directory corresponds to a program or a group of programs, and they're typically named after the binary path they apply to. AppArmor doesn't make any guesses, man. You have to use the exact absolute file name here. And also, when you launch the malware, it has to be launched from that directory, or it won't work. Okay, for this to work, the malware has to be built, it has to have a known path, and that path has to remain stable. Okay, now, so this would mirror a situation where, as a defender, you have discovered the malware on the system and you want to contain it. All right, now the thing is, though, in an upcoming lesson, we're going to be removing the malware's stable identity and executing it directly from memory. And so that is kind of how you duck this stuff. Okay, and so once again, man, this stuff is nowhere near foolproof, and you're gonna kind of have to be like, okay, well, my Mac system got me this far as a defender. Now what do I do, right? And so that's what we're going to look at in this lab. All right, so let's do this AppArmor bit. Okay, so you'll see here what you need to do is you need to go ahead and build the binary, copy it to a stable directory. Don't use target release because that's where Rust compiles things. And then change the permission to 755 and then run it to see if it works. So that's where I'm at right now. So let's run this thing to make sure that it works. Okay. So my last one was then. Okay. So got stuff everywhere. All right. You got user local bin test mount deleted, and yeah, it worked. So you see here, new time, and yeah, so everything is good there. So that's working. Now, so we have to create an initial AppArmor profile in complain mode. Okay. And so I've already done this so I can show you. So you'll see if we go to sudo vim etc AppArmor d user.local.bin.testmount. Right? So we'll see here. This is the rule. Okay, this is the one we're most concerned with, right? So if you guys want to go and look at the rest, you can. It's pretty basic regex kind of thing. So yeah, this is the one we're mainly focused on though, right? Audit, deny, opt high value lab. Okay, this is audit basically says to audit this, it basically, that's the command. And then deny is denial. Okay, now you saw currently that everything is coming back, right? And so that's kind of what complain mode does, but we'll see that in a moment. Okay, now the important thing here, so to let you know, and so we're already in complain mode, as you can see, but yeah, user local bin test mount equals, and then you go into it, right? So this is your binary, basically, okay? Now, so then what you got to do is then you come down here, next you load the profile, Okay, and so if you don't have AppArmor parser installed, that is part of AppArmor utils. Okay, you'll need to install that. Some systems come with it by default, some don't. Okay, and so when you run that, that will create the that'll load the profile for you. Okay, then what you can do is you come up and you put it in complaint mode. Mine is already there. Okay. All right, now we're in complaint mode. Okay, now if we run the malware again, all right, if we run the malware again, we'll see that nothing really changed, right? We're getting back the same stuff, right? And you'll see here it's a new time. So yeah, we're getting the same stuff back because we're just in complaint mode. Okay, so the idea about complaint mode is it's letting the malware do what it wants to do, but it's watching it. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to set this to enforce, right? Okay, then we're going to run the malware again. Now we see when we come back here, we have enforcement. Right? We're only hitting the one directory and then we're being denied. So AppArmor is locking us down. So, okay, great. You know, so AppArmor at least gave us containment. Okay, now, so obviously, so this is it, right? When you run the malware, that's going to be it. Now, from an attacker's perspective, this is good, right? Because this is like recon, right? This is letting us know that, okay, well, it got locked down, but it still sent us a beacon. It's still beaconed, so it did not crash. The malware is working as it's supposed to. And from defenders, okay, cool. You know, we can contain this thing. You know, we can kind of, you know, we can pick directories for it to go down to see what it does, and you know, we can see if there's any exfiltration here, etc. Right? We can just see, you know, there's some good stuff for defenders. Now though, okay, so but the thing is what good is containment without visibility? Okay, so let's check out where these logs, right, for AppArmor should be. Okay, so let's go in here and actually see what AppArmor did. So first thing, let's check the journal. We're going to check the last 20 entries in the journal. There's some yeah. So there's nothing here. You'll see here something from temp, snap. Yeah, there's really nothing here to do with our particular malware. Yeah, okay. So there's nothing really there for us. So let's audit. So AppArmor uses audit D under the hood. So let's check if the binary is mentioned in the audit D logs. Okay, ain't nothing there. Okay, so you may see other AppArmor denials, which we did, right? You may see no logs for our malware. And this is completely normal, right? Because AppArmor enforcement does not guarantee a visible audit record in its default configuration. Okay, this is expected behavior on modern Linux. So the reality here, right? So this is the reality of the thing, guys. You know, we're kind of in a paradox now because AppArmor clearly blocked the malware on the attacker's end. The attacker we got the beacon, right? The malware cleanly detected the block on the attacker's end. The defender, however, they have no kernel log. They don't really know. It's like, okay, we blocked it, but yeah, like what was it doing, right? And so this is an important lesson here. And this is kind of where a lot of courses kind of fall flat. They kind of teach you, oh, you just install this tool and it's going to give you these pretty logs. That's not the case, guys, right? It's just like hardening a system. You cannot rely on a single tool for everything. You have to stack solutions, and more often than not, you have to use your brain. Okay, so we got AppArmor for containment, but we don't have visibility. So what do? Well, wait. The malware left behind artifacts that we discovered in our temp directory. So let's go look at those, right? So if we come over here, and if we go, we're already in temp, and we see here, okay, we got fakey.log and fakey_report. So let's take a look at this fakey.log. Okay. All right, this does something. Okay, that's something that we'll back up and we'll keep for analysis and see if there's anything interesting in here. Okay, now, what about this? How about this fakey report JSON? Okay, what's interesting here is there's a target hit and there's a timestamp. So this is something that the attacker's seeing probably, since there's a timestamp here and this target hit. It's looking for something, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to back these up, right? We are going to make a directory on the desktop called MW backup. We're going to copy fakey.log there, and we're going to copy fakey_report.json there. Okay, make sure that they are there. Yeah. Okay, now, so let's go back to complain mode and let's see if these logs change. Okay, so we can just do it from right here. So what we can do is we'll do sudo aa complain, then we'll do user local bin testmal. Okay, now let's run it. Okay, now let's see if these logs changed. Doesn't look like much changed in this one. Okay, so let's see about the other one. Okay, big difference in this one. Yeah, so this is gold right here, right? You got financial reports it's looking for, says target hit true, everything has a timestamp. This is gold right here for defenders, right? So we got some containment with AppArmor. We did not get the visibility we expected, so we had to pivot to utilizing something different. We didn't have to get a new tool. We just had to look at what the malware was doing and the artifacts it left behind and be like, okay, let's see if we can get the information we need from there. Okay, so so that was very visual, right? You could run diff for a quick review on these, and I kind of show you how to do that here. And so yeah, so this file allows us to fully see what we contained as defenders and what the malware was searching for. Right, we can do further analysis on it and continue to refine our AppArmor profile for further investigations. And there's also telemetry tools we could also rely on here as defenders. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, okay, great, we're stacking here. We got a distance with AppArmor, and then we took it the rest of the way with the logs. What if we didn't have those logs? Well, then you're in a situation of where you're having maybe to introduce new tooling, EDR, syscall tracing, audit tuning. behavioral detection. So different tools and different techniques. Okay, and all of this will be covered as we continue on. Now, to wrap up, we evolved from enumeration to hunting. We operated successfully in an open environment, struggled under containment, the malware reveals its intent through failure, and we generate intelligence instead of noise, right? So from the attacker's side, we learned that capability alone is not enough. Intent shapes behavior, boundaries change strategy, and failure informs our evolution. Now we know where to go with this thing, right? So this, from an attacker's perspective, this was a successful test and recon functionality because it told us what it understood what we wanted, it knew where it was blocked, and it knew what mattered. Okay. And so you don't start with escalation. You start with learning your terrain first. Reconnaissance, right? So on the defender side, we didn't delete the malware, quarantine it, rely on SIGs or anything. We contained it. We didn't know what it was in advance. We contained it, observed it, shaped its behavior, and learned from its constraints. So you don't defeat malware by making it vanish. You typically defeat it by making it, predictable. Okay, so our next steps. So right now, our malware only acts when it runs, only reacts to what it already exists, and doesn't watch for opportunity. So we're not stopping here, right? So in the next evolution, it won't just search, it's going to wait. We're going to talk about persistence, observing change, reacting to new files, responding to opportunity, and we're going to reduce the footprint even further, right? So defenders aren't going to have as much to rely on, and that's going to make containment and detection pretty interesting. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Hope you learned something. Help each other out in the comments. Hit me up if you need anything. Ask those respectable questions, get respectable answers. And I will be posting a quick follow-up so that we can walk through the evolved malware code in detail. And I'm also starting a new series this week that's kind of more of a fun thing, but also educational. So be looking for that one. All right, guys, I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.